Over traffic flow at one Quincy intersection, a hot topic at tonight's Quincy City Council meeting.
Some residents wanted a stop sign placed at the intersection, but the Traffic Commission recommended that their referral be denied. WGEM Shakayla McCamick joins us now with what the council's decision ultimately was. Shakayla?
Daniel and Mackenzie, aldermen voted to deny the resolution seeking to place a stop sign at the 14th and Sycamore Street intersection. There are already a couple of yield signs at that intersection. Quincy Police Chief Adam Yates says there have not been car crashes at that intersection within the last 5 years. According to Yates, who's also the chairman of the Traffic Commission, a recent speed study supports that there's no real evidence that there's a specific need for the stop sign at this time.
The average speed through that particular area was about 24 miles an hour, if I remember correctly. So speed wasn't an issue. There weren't that many crashes considering, and it really just comes down to when you put stop signs up, that actually slows down emergency vehicles. It slows down or pushes traffic to other streets that just kind of cause more issues in other places. So ultimately it just comes down to need.
Yates says the speed study was done about 2 weeks ago with a covert device being hung on something like a utility pole. He says the number of vehicles that went by the device traveling both east and west and how fast they were going over 48 hours time were collected and used for the decision making. Daniel?
Thank you, Shakayla. And you can find a list of other topics that were discussed tonight at the council meeting on our website, WGEM.com.